and started to question whether God really loved me and loved my family. A sledgehammer to the family. Was God upset with us? You know, all these questions. Where's God in this? And why has God let this happen? Nothing more satisfying in life than knowing you're where the Lord has called you to be, because it's in the Lord's calling that we truly become who we're meant to be. Hello, my name's Father Andy Richardson. I'm a priest of the Diocese of Northampton. I've been a priest since 2008, growing up in Luton. So I was born in 1976 to a Catholic mother. So Mum was from Ireland, from Dublin, from a Catholic family there. And my father was from his family from the northeast of England, or Anglican. And if you understand Catholic history in this country, the Anglican Church came about in around really the 16th century, when Henry VIII wanted to divorce Catherine of Aragon, and he became head of the church. So as a Catholic, we're kind of here not as the state religion, but nevertheless Anglicans and Catholics work closely together nowadays. We're obviously recognised through baptism. We're all members of the body of Christ. Maybe not in full communion. As a boy, I had what we might call quite a strong spirit. So I liked to, well, I always thought I'd either be, you know, maybe a great saint or a worse sinner. And I think I was very competitive as a child. Having two older brothers, of course, I was trying to be like them. However, they were quite a bit older than me. But in sports, we were always very competitive, and in games, and I always wanted to win. And if I lost, it was not good. I didn't like losing at all, whether it was at sports or at games. And when I look back, I had a bit of a temper on me as well. I could get quite angry at times and frustrated, and make sure that was known in my family. And yet, at other times, I remember encountering, well, at church one time when I was there, a priest came in to begin to celebrate Mass, and I just had a sense of this being a very holy person. He turned out he was a holy person. He was the exorcist for our diocese. I didn't know that, but I sensed he was a holy man. And I also, what really touched me when I was a child was reading Mark's Gospel when we were at school. It's my first, well, what would be now year 7, the secondary school. And we went through Mark's Gospel, and that really spoke to me. I felt like Jesus was speaking to me. Thinking back to going to Mass as a child, I think like many children, there were other things in my life, and I would want to be doing other activities at the time, and so a bit reluctant going. But I often had a sense coming out of Mass of peace, and glad I went. And I remember actually the worship music, I would often feel a sense of the Lord's presence. Just the atmosphere in the church during Mass is something you don't find outside so easily. And I think I picked up on that as a child. There was something special about Mass. You're in God's house. You'd be respectful. You listen to the readings and receive communion. And there's a closeness with God, I think I felt at times as a child. And certainly being under God's protection as well, going to Mass. As a Catholic family, we wouldn't often pray at home, but it was nice to go to church together with my mother when we could, well, every Sunday. Having brothers, you know, there's often struggles in the family, you know, when we'd be playing games and I'll be getting a bit upset if I'm not winning. We'd have fights, etc. There was teasing, And so it's quite formative, if you want to think of it that way, formative as a young boy, typical family life really. But we had this faith aspect as well. I think was a real blessing for us as a young family, as you know, for me and my brothers. And also I think as we grow older and we learn about the world and we learn at school all sorts of different things and there's different viewpoints, it gets us questioning. And I think one of the key things we question is the love of God, and our trust of God gets tested. And all of us, I think, in our background, including myself, have things, wounds maybe we experienced as children that we've maybe grown up with. You know, it could be a sense of rejection. And for some reason, I did have a sense of rejection as I was growing up, and started to question whether God really loved me and loved my family. And a key thing that happened when I was 14 was my father died suddenly of a heart attack. It really, if I look back, it felt like a sledgehammer to the family. Was God upset with us? You know, all these questions, where's God in this? And why has God let this happen? And so I think my faith was certainly shaken at that time, and for my mum too, who had strong faith herself. Now we kept going to church, but I think for one reason or another we gradually got out of the habit. Mum was breaking down a lot of mass and she felt a bit embarrassed about that. But also I think, and if you know a bit about the grieving process, there's a time where you go through anger. And I'm pretty sure I was angry with God for what had happened. And I think my mum was too. And I guess we probably sensed, we thought we were rejected. It's a common experience that people have, I think, in bereavement. But it was a key time where I really questioned, you know, that because of that experience, my trust in God was really shaken. But all of this was in the context of feeling, not really feeling as close to God as I had as a child. And I was trying to find my own way and my own happiness, I guess, without God. And my way of doing that was to study hard, probably find a good job. And I did maths, physics and chemistry for A-level, got good results, went off to do a degree in chemical engineering. I chose that simply because I thought I would get a job, it would be probably fairly well paid, and it would be okay. And that was it. I tried to succeed and find happiness in ways, I guess, separate from God. So, you know, to be successful academically, to find things that would make me feel good, I think, to try and cover over the sense of loss, and I think of rejection as well. So even at sixth form, I got into going out with friends, and we'd drink alcohol, we'd go clubbing if we could. And it was a lifestyle that was fun at the time, but wasn't fulfilling. And the same continued when I went to university. So I went to study chemical engineering in Manchester, and yet the underlying feeling really was still, it wasn't healing the emptiness I felt within. I was seeking happiness and trying all the things the world offers, but it just wasn't coming. And at the time at university, when I was there was a mission, a Christian mission, and I did have a friend who was a Christian, who was a good witness to me. And others then I got into contact with as well. And I went to this mission, and it was about the love of God, and also of realizing, I suppose, helping me to realize that I was away from God and I needed to come back. I was a bit I wasn't quite sure, but what it did do was it got me back in touch probably with my, well, I'm sure with my sense of God as a child, and a reminder that God's there and calling me. And I remember someone coming to my door on the mission and they asked me two questions. One was, do you believe in God? And I answered, yes, I do. The second question was, do you believe that God loves you? And I answered, no, I don't. So my image of God was skewed. And while I wanted to come back to God, I found it quite difficult because I was already involved in so many worldly things. I was too attached really to the clubbing, to the drinking, to the relationships I was in, and was I ready to let go? But I needed to go on a journey and come to know more fully the love of God. So I succeeded in a worldly way. I got my degree. I got a first-class master's in chemical engineering. I got a job in London as a chemical engineer and went to work in London. It was a good salary, everything I'd kind of looked for when I was at sixth form, really. But once I got there, I thought, well, is this it? Is this all life has to offer? And as I was working, in the first few years in London, I started to get down. I hit a depression, really. That time at university when I thought about coming back to God, but I kind of continued this life away from God. But it came to a point where I was just so, the Lord, I think, allowed me to get to a point I was so low, hit rock bottom, literally, that I just begged the Lord, Lord, if you're there, please help. And so when someone came knocking on the door, I thought, yes, I think that's the Lord's invitation. I must go to it. And so I did go to it. And yes, I knew lots of things there already that we learnt about Jesus, but it was the first step on the road back, really, to the Lord. And actually, he did give me direct kind of a direct call as well. When I was walking through the park to work one day, I just felt, really, I don't know how to explain it, but I just felt the Lord calling me back to him. And it kind of just made sure, I think he made sure that I came back to him in many different ways. Just think about even the Alpha course running at that time, I was thinking of coming back. Many different people in my path that would help me make that journey back to him. So I thank God for that. But it was, yes, the guilt was certainly there, and I knew I'd have to have a long confession. But thankfully, I knew also from my childhood experiences that the Lord is a merciful Lord. The Anglican Church was very helpful, and it got me back into the reading the scriptures again, and we were going through St. Luke's Gospel. But there was also a question there, well, what shall I do now? I know I've been born and raised a Catholic. Does that mean I should stay a Catholic, or is the Lord calling me somewhere to a different church? And I know at the Anglican Alpha course, there's many different things I knew weren't quite right, like, for example, there was someone said at some point, well, Jesus had brothers and sisters, meaning siblings. Well, I knew he didn't. Is that the word actually for brothers and sisters is adelphoi, which can mean cousins as well. So I knew Jesus was the only child of Mary. I just remember that from our Catholic teaching at school. And there were things that didn't quite ring true at times, but it did get me questioning, should I stay a Catholic? And what really helped me was I went to a church I just got off the train one day as I was coming home from work in Ruislip, in fact, it's Church of the Sacred Heart in Ruislip. And I went into that church, and as soon as I sat down, I was just overcome with a sense of peace, because I've been wrangling with all these questions, should I stay a Catholic or not? And I was just overcome with a sense of peace, and that this is my home. And I put that down to the real presence of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, that Jesus is present in every Catholic church throughout the world, in the Holy Eucharist reserved in the Tabernacle, in the Blessed Sacrament. And then I got in touch with my mum, and she got me in touch with a priest in Luton who she knew, Father Mark, who was a tremendous help. I did know him a little bit from school, but he was fantastic. I came back to Luton. I moved back home actually at that time, and I went to see Father Mark. I knocked on his door, and I think it was just the beginning of Advent in 1999, and he spent, I think, 3 hours with me. When I came back to the Catholic Church in Luton, I attended Mass regularly, celebrated the sacraments, received communion regularly, confession, and I was on a journey, and I just got more involved in the Church's life. I at one point became a Eucharistic minister, and the question started to come, what does the Lord want me to do with my life? I'm already a chemical engineer, but I discerned that separately really from the Lord, but does the Lord want me to stay as an engineer, or what's his call in my life? I know we all had a baptismal calling to come to know the Lord and to know the Lord's love for us, but there are specific callings in the Church as well sometimes, and the Lord has a calling for each of us, a vocation. What's my vocation was my question. And so I went on a journey, and Father Mark was very helpful in that he guided me and helped me to listen to the Lord, in prayer, and to my heart as well, and to the promptings. In 2002, I went to Oscott Seminary in Birmingham to train as a priest. Something very important happened in that year as well. My mother died from a short illness, a rare form of lung cancer, in April that year. So that was a beginning of a new chapter in my life. During my mother's illness, though, I saw the power of the priesthood at work. And unlike my father's death, where I didn't really find much peace at the time, with my mother's death, it was completely different. Yes, I was older. I was now 26 compared to 14 when my father died, but at 26, there was a lot of peace really around my mother's passing. She came back to the church herself in the years prior and received the sacrament of the sick a number of times. Herself went to confession and received also the last rites. So I kind of saw, I guess for the first time, the power of the priesthood upon someone's death, and for it to be my mother was very profound. And I began seminary. As you go to seminary, you haven't just, it's not that you're 100% going to be a priest. You go to discern as well as to be formed. And so I got there, and I still wasn't sure if the Lord was really calling me to the priesthood, but I decided, well, I'll take a year at a time. And after the 5 years at seminary, I was ordained a deacon, a transitional deacon, which you ordained first a deacon and then a priest. And when we were going into that ordination ceremony, which was at the seminary, a year later then, you ordained a priest, and so thank God I was able to be ordained in my home parish. So actually I was ordained a priest in June 2008 in my Church of Baptism, St John the Apostle in Luton. So again, that link with baptism, with coming back to my faith and coming back to the Lord in that parish church, being ordained a priest then a few years later was a real blessing. One of the things I do remember about being ordained was that after we were just sitting quietly after communion, and I just felt deep within that I've received everything I need for my vocation now, that the Lord has given me everything I need to be a priest through that sacrament of holy orders. And so as a priest, I've experienced tremendous peace, joy. It's such a privilege to journey with people throughout life, all the key events of life, you know, from baptisms through to funerals. But also you have to deal a lot with difficult situations along the way as well. But always I find a grace is given, and you can sense tangibly as a priest the Lord ministering through you. You can see through the fruits of celebrating the sacraments, through the fruits of how those events and your priesthood affects the lives of others. And I should say, often life as a priest is quite varied, not just based in a parish, but myself, I've been involved as a vocations director myself. So remember, the person who helps someone discern in the priesthood, to journey with them and guide them, and if it's the right decision that they go to seminary, you help the bishop to discern that. I'm involved in Catholic Charismatic Renewal, which has been a tremendous blessing for me personally as a priest. I'm a companion of the heart for the Court Lumen Christi community who are based in Chertsey. I think the theme of the prodigal son does keep coming back to me. If you look at my journey that I've described of knowing some of the Father's love, of going away from that for many years as a teenager and at university, and then finding my way back with the Lord's help into the Father's arms and finding my true place in His kingdom here on earth, and then finding my way back with the Lord's help into the Father's arms and finding my true place in His kingdom here on earth.
You can't always.
This is the death.
Remarkably empty.
Turn back towards God. Rise up.